The best onboarding is about making a person feel excited to be there. I want people at the end of their first day to talk to their family and friends and say, I'm so excited. I'm so excited I get to work at this place. And then the spin-off is a lot of times for people, they feel like corporate training is boring. It's a waste of my time. I don't know why I need to take this. I don't see how it's going to help me do my job. The reality is probably in about, definitely over 50%, 60% of the time, a person doesn't actually need training.
With me today is Marci Araki. She is the Chief Learning Officer at Clearest Course Consulting. She helps companies align learning strategies with business and performance needs. And I think today's video will be very interesting because I think we've all made these mistakes. So, Marci, how are you feeling today?
I'm doing great. How are you, Zivko?
Doing fantastic. Now, let's start with the heavy hitters right off the bat. Watching someone else doing the work is not learning how to do the work. What do you mean by that?
Watching by nature is a really passive activity. So that's the first issue right there is when you're watching someone, it's passive. So even if you're having a conversation with someone, the best learning actually comes from doing something yourself. So that's the first issue with watching, and in particular with onboarding, because the idea of job shadowing or watching someone work is used a lot in corporate onboarding. The second issue with watching someone, unless it's structured, you may not get the context. So you're seeing a variety of things. There's a variety of tasks that you're watching someone do, but without the structure and the context, it's like a new person has no way to structure all of that information into a flow and into a story that makes sense to them. And so it feels a little bit like you're getting bombarded with information. You're seeing a lot. I've been in that position where I write a lot of notes down and then I think, oh, this is great. I've got a page full of notes. And then I go back to my desk and I can't make sense of any of it. And that's what I mean when you don't have the context. You feel like you're learning a lot, but it's not anything that you could translate into actually helping you do something afterwards.
Interesting, because I think we've all started from this place. And you work with a lot of clients. How did this idea came to be? Like, what is the thinking behind watch this person do it? They're the best person we have in the company, and you will learn from them.
There's two things, one of which I think is purely logistical, which is it takes time to plan how to onboard someone properly. And it's not something that a lot of companies have the time to do or recognize the importance. And so the easiest thing, and I've been in both positions, obviously, I've onboarded people and I've been onboarded. In two instances, I was given an hour. I got into work in the morning and I was told, hey, we've got a new person starting. How about you just show them around? And so in my experience, that's not uncommon because you think, well, just show them around. So in an office environment, yeah, I can show them, here's your desk, here's where to find things. But in terms of the actual work that a person's going to do, it's not as easy as just showing them, well, here's the washroom and the kitchen and the fire exit. And I think that's where the strategy of thinking show them around kind of falls down, because then you think, well, just sit next to me. I'm going to do a few things and then I'll show you. I'll show you where we put our files. I'll show you this. This is how we use this system. This is how I do this. And so in those two instances where I was given an hour to prepare, that's what I did. I kind of went about my day and said, well, just watch me. I had people accompany me to meetings. And my advice was to say, well, we'll talk about it afterwards. We're going to be talking about this. And, try and keep up. But in all of those instances, there's a lack of context. There's I didn't plan it in thinking about what is their circumstance, what are their questions, what do they need, and maybe that's really what I struggled with when I did that type of onboarding. Is I thought about it from, what do I think they need? What is my schedule today? And how can I get this done? How can I onboard a person and still do my work? I didn't think about it from what their needs were.
When we're looking at the way that you explain it, I think it was subtle, but there's a difference. You talked about onboarding and you talked about training. Most people say it's the same thing. We're going to onboard someone for the first week. What is the difference between onboarding and training?
That's an interesting one. What I've seen is a lot of onboarding, we think of it as knowledge and skills training. We think of it in terms of, I need to give you a lot of the knowledge and skills that you need to get started in your job. And so this is where I think the idea of job shadowing comes in. Of course, now with a lot of companies, there's mandatory courses, cybersecurity, respectful workplaces, those kind of courses. So we really, with onboarding, we hone in on knowledge and skills. The best onboarding, and I think what really works for onboarding, isn't knowledge and skills. It's about relationship building. The best onboarding is about making a person feel excited to be there. I worked at one company where the outcome for the onboarding was, I want people at the end of their first day to talk to their family and friends and say, I'm so excited. I'm so excited I get to work at this place. And that really struck me, because then I realized that's really what it is. There's time to learn the stuff, the knowledge and skills, spaced out. But onboarding, when we think about maybe those first critical days, I really focus in on organizational culture, making a person feel welcome, building relationships.
When we're talking about building the relationships, how do you do it in a way that it's not a burden for the other person? Is that something that is scheduled? Is that part of the onboarding setup? How do your clients do that? How do you show them what is the right way?
When I've worked in a few companies that I'd say that they emphasize culture, I think that approach to onboarding needs to be ingrained in the organization's culture. From the very top, sort of demonstrated, say, from your C-suite, it's something that is shown and is demonstrated. Looking at PowerPoint slides where you look at mission and values and you talk about culture, but it's not demonstrated, that's where I think it can fall a little bit flat. And so the example that I saw that really worked, there was, say, the chief operations officer who, they came into our onboarding and they didn't talk about operations. They didn't talk about, this is what I do. They told stories. He told stories. He talked about why he was excited to be there. It's like, I've invested, 20 years of my career here. I started out and I did this. This is what excites me. They talk about what the organization does to build the culture and to build this sense of community. And the one takeaway that I got from that, which is really funny, was simply, I want to get his recipe for cauliflower wings. But that's what we talked about, right? Is I got a sense that, number one, he was passionate and he was approachable. And by making it part of the culture, I got the sense that even though I was new everyone was really approachable. And I got that sense because it was demonstrated to me. Because you had, the chief operations officer and come in and just kind of chat with people for half an hour and an hour.
It's just it's coming down and talking with the person that is joining that day, and not going through mission, vision, values. It's more sharing those stories. Like 20 years ago, I was doing the exact same thing, and the building was crumbling, but now we have this new thing, and it's more being approachable, being passionate, showing the stuff that you're doing, and building culture basically on day one. Now, a lot of companies want to build culture, and they're like, communication is very important, and we're building a strong culture. What are some of the myths or the gimmicks that companies do that they have good intention, but they're not really building culture?
That's the first example that popped into my mind, and a lot of this I think was heavily influenced by COVID, because of course for a lot of us who went through that transition of working in an office, where I think it is a lot easier because it's something that, the water cooler conversations that we talk about, there's more opportunity for informal conversation. With working remotely, and this is the example that popped into my mind, is the idea that not everyone wants forced fun. And and I understand that a lot of it came out of COVID, and a lot of it came out of companies trying different ways to emulate that water cooler conversation, to find opportunities for the informality where a lot of times relationships can grow and build. And it was harder. I think holiday, or, sort of celebrations, whether they be holidays or projects finished, there was feeling amongst, say, some of my colleagues, where the idea of forced fun, like they felt like they needed to participate in sort of company fun events, but they didn't want to. And I know I had one colleague who kind of said, like, I didn't like participating in these things when I worked in an office. I find them uncomfortable. If I want to hang out with my coworkers, I'd rather just arrange to meet them for lunch or after work, one-on-one. But the idea of sort of team gatherings, so for some people, it's just not their thing. And I think after COVID, because there's such an emphasis on, we need to get people together, we need to schedule informality, which is kind of an oxymoron now that I think about it, right? You can't schedule informality. So it did feel forced for many people.
I'm thinking of 2 years ago when I tried this scheduled informality. That's the best way to explain it. I wanted to have that feeling of the office, where I was like, look, we'll have a time, like an hour or two, I think it was in the morning or in the middle of the day, where it's like office hour. Basically anybody can join on that link, and we'll just talk about whatever you want. Same kind of concept as if you have lunch with some of your colleagues at work. It didn't work at all because it was scheduled. Like, some days you're just sitting there alone, some days someone bounces and like, oh, by mistake, like, I'm sorry, the wrong link or something. It was so awkward because that, like you said, that informality happens as you're walking in the hallway. It wasn't scheduled, it wasn't planned, and then something comes out of it. Or if you need someone's help, you will call them to your office, or the common area where you might have it. And I think that scheduling so that we are staying connected in an artificial way definitely created this feeling of forced fun. I remember there was an event for typically like the Christmas ones are you need to wear a hat, you need to do this, I'm like, I don't want to do any of these things. I celebrate it with my family, but I don't want to do this in front of a camera.
Yeah, we were on a big team, and we broke it into breakout rooms, and we had little games, and we did activities together, and some of it was okay, but other times you're a little bit aware that, you're like, oh my gosh, like, I got the boss in my group kind of thing.
Yes.
And it's hard. Like it's not for everyone. I appreciate what companies do, but I also acknowledge that it's really difficult. I
Now,
Sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say we understand the gimmicks of it in the wrong way. What are the right building blocks for creating a culture in a company, whether it be for success or expanding horizons, multicultural or diverse? What are the right ways of doing it?
I've seen a few things. One I didn't experience personally, but that was I had a friend who worked at a smaller company, and they really leaned into the idea of like their Slack channel. And I think what my friend saw was that there's a real diversity of different interests and groups and teams. And so there's a feeling that you could kind of just slide in and leave a comment and talk about things. So whether it was like, your lunch hour routine, whether it was your fitness routine, I think my friend really got into the idea of like the fitness routine and how we were gonna like work together and break up our days so we weren't just like locked in front of our computer. Um, and I think that's what my friend sort of felt was that there is a diversity of interests and feeling free to just sort of pop in and out. And maybe that's it. I've also seen it at a larger company where there were a lot of different groups or teams, like you said, people who went out hiking, people who got together for charitable events, people who got together and did the 10K run together, not my thing. But then the other thing that I saw in this case is that it was recognized and celebrated. And I think maybe one of the key things that I really felt was that you could participate and do that throughout your workday. There wasn't the sense of like taking time away from work to participate in different teams or groups.
And it's easier. It's a different way of communicating because you're just sliding into the channel from time to time. You crack a joke, you laugh. You don't feel this need of like, we have 30 minutes, make jokes, laugh. Like it doesn't
Get
feel
back
like
to work.
yeah, to get back. Right. Okay. Now, if someone is going through this process and they're like, okay, this is pretty cool. I can see how I'm doing some stuff that is maybe it's not the right way to approach it because I have like good intentions. Another one that is fairly popular when it comes to like SOPs, for example. Let's make a video about this one. Just make a SOP around that one and be done with it. What are some of the mistakes that you see companies do when it comes to that approach of I'm going to teach, I'm going to train or onboard just by making a video about something they do?
I laugh because it is incredibly common, and you mentioned videos, which I would call a bit of a trend. Like any industry, there are trends, there are fads. And when I use that word, I don't mean to say that they don't work. It just becomes the big thing. And videos in learning and development, it still is kind of a big thing because it's like, we talked about it to start. We were like, oh, I saw this on YouTube. I saw this on YouTube. We all go to YouTube. We learn things. So for companies, it makes sense. It's like, well, people are already going there to learn things. I'm going to make a video. What happens is that one way to train people, it's not a one size fits all approach. So absolutely videos work for some things. Short videos work really well for some things. How do I get the SIM card out of my phone? Fantastic. I found a YouTube short, a minute and a half. It was great. I don't want to read instructions on that. Video, great. The problem is that when you use it to solve all of your training problems, that's when it doesn't work. Because again, videos are passive. You press play and you watch. So for things where it requires interaction, a conversation, talking to people, a back and forth, a discussion, something like a video, which is a one-way transmission of information. It's really difficult. And that's broadly what I see a lot in learning and development is we latch onto something like a video. A video doesn't work if it's something really hands-on. Games is also something. Games are great. Gamification. People like playing games. It really works well for some things where it's like, we're going to have a score, we're going to have people compete, I'm going to put a timer on it. It doesn't work in all circumstances. So my caution there is, don't start with the type of training. Don't start with how I'm going to deliver it. I always say it's like work backwards and say, well, what do I want a person to be able to do? What does success look like? What will a person be able to do after the training that they can't do now? And so that's what I mean by I start at the end. I start with this vision of success and then work backwards and say, well, what does a person need to know and to do in order to do that? And then the third or fourth step is saying, well, how am I going to best deliver that information to support a person being able to do something different? So what is step 3 for me is oftentimes, very common as step 1 in a lot of other circumstances, which is let's create a video.
Interesting. So you're starting from the back. You're starting from what is the outcome, what is success look like, the vision for success. Yeah. Then you will start to plan what is the training needed to do that, and then you go to what is the best way to deliver that information. That's what you were saying. Sometimes shadowing or video, gamification, these are all tools for the outcome.
Yeah, and actually the step 2, there is a common misconception, I believe, that training is a bit of a cure-all. So if I'm not able, this is how it was put to me and how I learned it. If I'm not able to do something at work, the solution is I need training. The reality is probably in about, definitely over 50%, 60% of the time, a person doesn't actually need training. Training works when you don't have the knowledge or skills to do the job. So you're rolling out something new, that's a bit obvious. I'm going to train you on how to do something new. But a lot of times in workplaces, the common reasons why people aren't doing something correctly, they're not given feedback. So all of this is outside of the training realm of, Marcy doesn't have the knowledge and skills. I don't actually know. I wasn't really told what I was supposed to do. I didn't get any feedback, so I didn't know that I was doing it improperly. I don't really have the tools, so maybe it's something physical. But what I'm looking at and what I'm saying is these are all on sort of the organizational end. So you have your organization that is there. We talked about culture earlier. That's a big part of how organizations support people. Organizations also support people with things like a clear understanding of what my job is and what I'm doing, giving people feedback, giving people the support, the motivation, the tools, I need a fast laptop in order to, I'm an animator. I need a fast laptop, or whatever that case is. We focus a lot in the industry on training, and that's very much an individual knowledge and skills issue. So that second step, most of the time, I would say, training is not the solution. And that is really, really tough in our industry. And it's why a lot of times training gets created. It doesn't help people do their job better. Companies invest a lot of money in training that may not be useful, that isn't the best way to get the performance that they're looking for. And then the spin-off is a lot of times for people, they feel like corporate training is boring. It's a waste of my time. I don't know why I need to take this. I don't see how it's going to help me do my job. And for someone who's spent, a good number of years in the industry, that's why I cringe a little bit. It's like, that's tough, because I can't deny it. A lot of it is true. Yeah.
There was, I forgot how many years ago. This was a long time ago. I worked at Esso, and I was doing like car washing. I wasn't even like at the pump or anything. I was doing the car washing, and they made me watch a women's workplace safety training, something. I was like, who made this? It's unwatchable. It is horrific. The situation out of like I think it was like a 3-hour training, bunch of videos and whatnot I have to go through. I think like maybe 20 minutes was truly applicable at a gas station, because this was made for Esso. There's a bunch of different versions. There is like maybe 20 minutes that was actually applicable. That, yeah, like don't put a broom because you will trip over and you'll go directly into the machine, and more will be rinsed than just the car. Stuff like that was like really practical, and like, oh, this is how the machine works. Well, these are the tools. Like, don't touch this, change this. Like, these are like the important things. This is where you put this. This is how you start and stop, whatever. But there was a bunch of stuff that it doesn't apply for me. Maybe it works for the cashier, maybe it works for someone at head office, but we're all lumped into this, like, and again, this was like when I was a teenager, I think, and I was like, I had that feeling exactly what you said. Corporate training is boring. It's it's not really, it was a small percentage that was practical. Now, if the feedback has been existing for decades, why do corporations still create boring corporate training?
My honest thought is sometimes it's the CYA, it's to cover your, it's to cover your butt. It's we need people to understand a lot of this. And so you put it really well, some of it may apply to someone working in the office, but not me. But that takes a bit of time to figure out that someone who's washing cars versus someone at the pump versus someone who's at the till need different training. And that takes some time and effort, and the realization that that's important. And sometimes it's just easier to lump everything together and to say, everyone needs to take all of this. And then a company will sort of say, oh gosh, well, I mean, they took the training. We did give people all of that information. So I do think there's some of that. That might be one. I think the other is, and I think of a couple of circumstances of training that I had to take. And it's maybe where the first issue is what I said is not starting at the end. And the one that I think of is I've taken training on fire extinguishers. How to use a fire extinguisher. That's actually really valuable. If you work in an office, you see them everywhere, and it's like, we need to know how to use it. Except in that instance, I was working from home. So that was the first thing that a lot of us sort of caught. It's like, number one, the training was 3 hours and I was confused. I had colleagues saying, so is the company going to send me a fire extinguisher for my home? I'm not sure why I've been asked to take this. The other issue is, I don't know if you've ever used a fire extinguisher before. I got trained in how to use one. I was told that there are 3 steps, hold a pin, point at the base. And anyways, why was this training 3 hours long? Well, because the person who developed it was really into the subject, and they talked a lot about the chemical composition of fire retardants, which is one of the issues we talked about, which is, they were really interested. They really had a lot to say about the subject, and it was really important to them. I totally understand that. I am really geeky about things that I am geeky about. But in this instance, the training could have been probably a poster that was 3 steps, and instead it was e-learning that was 3 hours long. Didn't think about what the end user needed in order to be able to use a fire extinguisher. Thought about, I have all sorts of really cool information that I want to say about it, and here you go.
And it felt like a little bit of a pet project for someone. Like, this is not really applicable. We're working from home. I don't need a fire extinguisher.
And totally, I think so, and I could see it, and I've kind of been in that position before where people have asked me really simple things about training, and my brain blows up, and I keep thinking, oh, I've got so many cool things to say, you know. But in a training that's focused on one thing, that's hard. But yes, in those cases, it really is not about what the instructor wants to say or thinks is important. It's about what is the person, the trainee, the end user, what are they going to be able to do at the end of it?
Interesting. Saying interesting because I never thought of it from that perspective, and now it kind of opens my mind to how some of the training that I have, and I think it's a tough pill to swallow, but the feedback loop that you were saying, it feels like most of the leadership will just say, do more training. Just training wasn't good enough, as opposed to, well, actually, Mr. CEO, Mrs. CEO, you need to give feedback and you suck at it. So you just need to give feedback and talk to your people and tell them what is good and tell them what is bad. Don't just create all these training modules and training courses. It's the feedback part. Now, probably a lot of people are not thinking of that part. How does someone, and this is just my opinion, how does someone get good feedback without feeling like, man, I'm demoralizing people?
Oh gosh, that's tough, isn't it? I think it's tough because you're looking at both. It's the giving and the receiving. I think what I've learned a lot generally with workplaces, with work, it's not personal. So, and as I said, I've been working for a good number of decades, and I'm just realizing this now, and I struggle with it mightily, which is, this is what I do, but it's not who I am. So this is not personal. And I know it's hard, and for many roles and many things that we do, well, it is personal. Like, I've invested, you're a business owner, like you invest a lot of your heart and soul and who you are into growing this. But when I mean it's not personal, and this comes down to giving feedback. Just because I made a mistake, just because I could have done X and I did Y, it doesn't mean that I'm a bad person. It doesn't mean that I didn't try. Doesn't mean that I'm not smart enough. Doesn't mean that I have a problem with authority and I didn't listen to my boss. And I would say that with feedback, this is sort of like what's hovering below all of that is, and when we say constructive feedback, is to think of it in terms of an opportunity to improve and to get better, and not about someone thinks that I suck.
When we're looking at giving the feedback, like constructive criticism and positive reinforcement, what is that fine line when you're not developing complacency, where you start to feel like maybe I'm too lenient because I have a high level of understanding and empathy, but things are not being done, and I don't want to sound that I'm coming down every single day. How do you find that balance where you are criticizing, you are giving feedback, but you're also not developing complacency?
I think about, I was really young and I had a job in sales and I wasn't good at sales, and I actually had a client give me the best feedback, and I'd say it was 4 steps. The first one was empathy. The first one was, he said, are you new at sales? Cold calling is tough. This is really tough. I get it. I still struggle with it. So number one is empathy. Made me feel like we're in this together. I understand. I totally understand. This is hard. People struggle with this. So that's the first one, is empathy. And then the second one, sort of the second and the third, he was really specific. And I think this is important, is use empathy to establish the rapport. Be really specific. And what he said with me was, you talked really quickly. And so that was very specific. And then the third thing he said was, well, why? And he said, you spoke really quickly, and it was hard for me to understand. And when you speak really quickly, you don't give opportunity for people to think in between. When you pause, it gives opportunity for people to think. And I went, right. So empathy, specific. What is the impact? Why is that important? And then he ended our conversation with something really positive. Like, we actually tried it out. He said, okay, repeat what you just said to me and try that again. And I did. And he ended up with saying, you know what? I'm seeing improvement already. I'm seeing improvement already. Good for you. So started with empathy, ended with something positive, was really specific, and gave really specific feedback.
Interesting. I think a lot of people they're not specific with the criticism or with their feedback. It's like they burst through the door in an office, 50 things happened, and they know something is wrong, but they're not articulating exactly what is wrong for that. Whatever happened, they're just like in the moment, and you're trying to understand like exactly, and then the other person is defensive. They're nitpicking on the comments, like, but what about this? You mean this? I don't know what you mean by that. I said on that call, and it starts to become very combative. It's not a debate. It's not a discussion. It's not even. There's no positivity, and I feel like it's because people, leadership, owners are sometimes not very specific. They just kind of burst out and say all kinds of stuff at that person.
I would say that happens not just at work. I mean, in my experience, that happens. That's like a broader communication, because you hit on it right there, which is something happens in the moment. You're upset, physically, it's like your shoulders are up here, your breathing is shallow, your voice is higher. You want to make your point, but without thinking about it, it's like someone else picks up on your anxiety and your, and so it gets returned to you. If it's delivered in such a way like that, then a person is going to feel like literally defensive, like your words are blowing me back. And so, and it's exactly as you said, you start in this cycle of defensiveness and combativeness, and it could be not anything to do with that.
That's right. Now, if someone is going through this process and understands the steps they need to do, and they're trying to do the feedback the right way, and they're not building boring corporate training. One of the things that I saw on your LinkedIn, the post you had, was lessons from your dad. Sometimes you have to let people make mistakes. I've let that happen, and I've been very transparent with the team member. I was like, I'm not gonna sit you to fail, but you want to do this. I'm telling you, I've tried it and it didn't succeed. By the way, there was another person before you tried it. That didn't work. I think it's a different direction, but you're adamant. You have my support. Go ahead and do it. I don't want to say like sure confident, because again, I had the data to back up. Like that way of doing it wouldn't get us where we need to be, because we tried it twice. I'd let the mistake happen, and then we kind of corrected course and went in a different path. What have you seen that finding that balance between letting people make a mistake, but not setting them for failure?
Yeah, it is a fine line, and the one thing that I firmly believe is people learn best from their own mistakes. It's really hard to learn from other people's mistakes. I am not a parent, but I appreciate that as parents, this is a a daily experience. Learn from what I did. It's like, oh, that's really tough though. And so when we're talking about workplaces, yeah, safety is the number one issue. In some circumstances, like I work in an office, or like I work from home. My work involves me and a laptop. But in some workplaces, there is a safety consideration. So you don't want people to make mistakes where there's safety involved, where there's regulatory issues. But the idea of letting people make mistakes is also how people learn best. And I think, like the scenario that you described, it works because the debrief, you want a person to be able, and this is what I learned from my dad, you want to examine a person's thought process. So what you did, it's sort of like, well, if you think this is going to work, you've thought through it, then try it. And then when you circle back, it's to go through the thought process again and to say, well, what did you learn from that experience? How would it change your thought process, your thinking, your decision making in the future? What have you learned from this experience that you can take to the next one? And that's, I think, what I mean by the idea of, I've read a lot of things to not even call it mistakes or failure. It's really, it's such it's a mindset that I talk about a lot. And because I struggle with it a lot, it's a mindset to not see things not working out as a mistake. It's a mindset to see it as, this is great. I got an opportunity to learn something. If anyone has advice on that mindset, I am completely open to how to do that better, because it's hard.
It is hard. I think the one thing that is working for me, I would say right now today, I don't know how it will kind of pan out. It's the timeline horizon. Extend this on a bigger timeline horizon. Is it a mistake on a grand scheme of things? Is it a colossal, I can't come back out of this? Or is it something that doesn't feel good today? Maybe it's something really big, doesn't feel good for the next week or two. Or is it something you can't recover from it at all, and you've made a huge mistake? Once you put it in a big enough horizon, at least that has worked for me. I start to understand it's something that it's today, it is a mistake, but if I learned it today, that means that, for the next 50, 20 years, I'm good. I truly learned from it. And like you said, going back to that process, like, what did you learn from it? That has changed it to feel less of a painful thing and less to course correct. I did a lot of that in the past. I would like, oh, this is bad, like change and go that direction 180. And now it's more kind of like looking at it, like you said, it's an opportunity to learn. You don't change course, but you learn from it. Don't make it don't let it happen again. And on a bigger timeline, it doesn't feel that bad.
The value, you're so right, and it's the value of experimenting. The value of, there's a certain freedom and a value of not knowing, And I think it's also something that people have told me, it's like to adopt the mindset of a child, like when you're a kid, you don't know things and you just run off and you do things and it doesn't work, and you do it again and it doesn't work, and you just keep trying things and you're with your friends and it's fun. That very same activity when you're an adult somehow becomes not so fun. And yet for us to adopt that spirit of experimentation, of trial and error, of not having the weight and this burden of like, oh, I'm a bad person, I'm not smart enough, what's wrong with me, all of that, that weight sort of fall on you. And to adopt the freedom of experimentation, as he said, like,
I would say it's you're absolutely right, because the big discoveries that I've had is when I tried to experiment something I didn't want to do, like, at all. The most recent one is vibe coding. I'm like, I don't want to do this at all. I don't have time. I don't want to learn it at all. Like, I don't want to touch this. I have so many other things that are going really, really well. And one of my friends was like, hey man, I have some lifetime subscriptions to these like 2-3 tools. Do you have like 30 minutes? I'm like, look, man, do whatever you want. I'll help you market them. I'm pretty good with direct marketing. I'll help you market them. I was like, sure, no problem. And then one of them was like, can you actually do this one thing? I'm like, how? Well, do this. And then I was like, okay, now I get the whole hype. Now I understand what you mean that SaaS is being like destroyed. And now I understand when you're saying that the coding part is being consumed by AI. Now I'm like, because I saw that, it was super clear, but it also gave me peace that when it comes to like writing things and generative, it's not even near. So that gave me peace for one thing, and it opened my mind to like, okay, so these SaaS subscriptions, you could, on a big enough horizon, eliminate them all and make your own things. And it came from that little experiment. Let's try it.
And you've hit on like 3 really valuable learning points right there, which is experimentation. Start small. Don't try and learn everything at once. Oh my gosh, start with one small task. Video games are fantastic for this. I don't play video games. I suck. But, my friend has got me to sit down because he said, think about how you're learning this. And it's like you learn one thing, which is, what do the A and B and X and Y buttons mean on the controller? Walk forward, pick up an item, turn around. And I'm like, woo, I did that. And then, you get rewards. This is a great example of gamification too. But you start small with one task. You get the reward. And like you said, you see it and then you're like, oh, I get this. And then your mind takes over and it's like, oh, well, if I could do this, no, I want to do this. Oh, I'm seeing how this and this fit together. And like you said, it's your motivation builds as well, which I think is another underlying concept behind all learning, which is you get into that state of, now that I'm really excited, I learned one thing about coding. I can do another thing. I can do the third thing. I'm seeing how this fits. Well, then you're off, Your motivation is there. Your confidence is there. Your willingness to try things and experiment is there because you've gotten through the first couple of hurdles.
Big hurdles.
Huge hurdles.
Huge hurdles. Now, Marcy, someone is listening to this whole thing and they're like, wow, this is really interesting. I want to work with Marcy to show me how to do properly training, onboarding, and develop a culture in our company. How do people get a hold of you to work with you?
I am available. I'm on LinkedIn. You could find me there. We could put my email information. Clearest Course website, you can contact me through there. But the best and the easiest ways, you can just shoot me an email. I guess we'll put all of that in the video.
We will. Got it. Marcy, thank you so much for the time. This was eye-opening. I think, at least for me, the biggest lesson is the feedback. People don't want to give the feedback and they hide behind a lot of training as opposed to stop and talk to your team, give them proper feedback, being involved in a process. So I appreciate you sharing all that information. Thank you so much, and wish all the success.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about this.